Well, Gary, this tape is made for you, and by golly, I hope you enjoy it. And you're a fine fellow, and you're a fine sportsman, and a good hunter, and you handle what I know about it, your bird dogs, and by golly, that makes it. And you've been awful good to me, and I'm glad to be your friend. Now, you wanted to know about my brothers. Well, I'm going to tell you some about all of them. Now, Ernest, he was the oldest one of the family, of the boys. There were 7 of us. There was Ernest, Bill, then Leela the girl, then Vincent, then Barney, then Arthur, then Clell, then Dale. That's me. Now, Ernest, just like from July till November, of being 20 years older than I am. And he and I were partners, though, for many years. And he done the handling of the lining up the clients and the paperwork, and I done the hunting. But he was a good hunter and done quite a lot of hunting before he got to where he had to take it easy and took over the handling of everything. And by golly, he was a good hunter, only that, but he was really, he was a lucky hunter. Now, I don't think that I've told this before about the first line that any of the Lee brothers ever tied up. Well, it was Ernest and Vincent that done it. And they done it in the basin of Cave Creek in the Cherry Cow Mountains on the east side, close to where that I was raised on East Turkey Creek at Paradise. Well, Vincent and Ernest went over into this Cave Creek basin and horseback with the hounds, and I believe that they only had 2 hounds, Blue and a little Skip that Ernest called him. He'd got him out of Mississippi. Now, this was years and years ago. This was around in the real early 30s. And maybe 30, 31, I believe. And anyway, they hit this lion's track and they trailed her up and caught her. It was a female lion, and we called her. They come in, and well, you could get up Cave Creek from going way around by a truck. So one of them come in, they packed her down to where they'd get to her in a truck, and then one of them brought the horses over and left her. I believe Ernest stayed with the dogs and the lion, and then Vincent went back and got them. And the dogs rode right along with the lion as they came back, and the lion was tied up. Well, we put her in an old house and put a collar and chain on her, and so we called her Simple Amy. Well, the reason we named her Simple Amy, just a while before that, and everybody was thinking about it, there was a big, I know this is just a publicity stunt, this gal, this woman is supposed to have been kidnapped and took across the border into Mexico, and she's supposed to have walked into Douglas and got away from them. Well, she did come into Douglas, but she just looked like she'd stepped out of a bandbox, and it was all a publicity stunt, some kind of a religious fanatics or something. And so we just laughed and called this lion old Simple Amy. Well, now that was in the spring. And well, now in the fall, sometime in October, well, this lion got got away, and she broke one link of her chain and right up next to the collar. And she had on her collar and the snap and one link of a chain. And she tore out of that old house and was gone before we knew it, so long that we never could trail her up and jump her anymore. So that was then the next spring that Ernest and Vincent was back over in that Cave Creek Basin hunting and had these same two dogs and another hound. Well, this other hound picked up this line track and Skip and Blue didn't want to run it, and Ernest told Vincent, says, Vincent, that's old Simple Amy. Well, anyway, they caught her, but she never would climb a tree, and she got out into the bluffs there and was running those bluffs, and they wasn't going to kill her if it's Simple Amy. But she was in those bluffs and running in the bluffs, and Vincent raised up and shot her. And she fell about 500 feet right off a high bluff, and he said when she turned and fell, he thought he saw the collar, and when he got to her, well, sure enough, it is old Simple Amy. And in the meantime, by golly, she had come in season and had 4 unborn in her, about the half formed, about the size of big rats. And so anyway, well, now Ernest was about 6 feet tall, weighed about 100 and part of the time he weighed between 175, maybe 76, 77, 78, somewhere along there. And he was kind of on the slender build. He wasn't, but he was wiry all right. And now he was the best bronc rider of any one of the Lee boys. When he came out from Texas with her father and come into that San Simon Valley down there by rodeo, well, he was 19, 20 years old. When they were out there a year before we come, and I was only a year and a half old when we came out. So that would have made Ernest about 19 when they first come there. Well, he punched cows for a lot of those big outfits, and he got to riding those wild horses, and he was a good bronc rider. And he was a lucky hunter, and he learned to hunt good, and he learned it on his own. He didn't have nobody to show him how to hunt lines and how to do this and do that. Us boys didn't have no teachers, only one brother teaching another. And by golly, we had to learn it on our own. These boys these days, a lot of them go with somebody and learn all the basics without making all the bad mistakes that a fellow makes when he first starts out on something, when he don't know anything about it. And that's the way we had to learn it. But that's the way you learn it good, when you learn it yourself and through lots of sweat and hard work. He was a nice looking fellow, and nice built, wiry built. At one time, him and a bunch of fellows, well, I was 7 years old, so he was 27. They went on from Paradise. They took a pack outfit and went plumb into the Black Range Mountains of New Mexico and stayed all winter. They was gone, or most of the winter. They was gone 3 months, I think, and he never shaved during the time that he was gone. And when he came back, the last night they just camped 6 miles from Paradise, and her father was running this stage line, and he come along in his old, I guess it was a Chevrolet, and taking the mail to rodeo, and Ernest went out and stopped him and said he wanted to ride down. And so Father said, all right, that he hauled passengers. And so Ernest got in the car with him and asked him how much he charged, and father says, well, I think it is 75 cents or $1.25 or something. And Ernest says, well, now, old man, says, that's pretty doggone steep. And Papa got mad and called him the old man because he had a full set of beard. Says, now, by grab, if you don't want to go and haven't got the money, you just get out and let me get going. And now the minute up walked some of these other boys that left with Ernest, and Papa knew them, and he jumped out of the car and shook hands with them and went to talking to them. And finally one of them said, Mr. Lee, aren't you going to speak to your son? And he looked all around to see where his son was, and the old boy said, there's that son of yours sitting up there in the car by the side of you. And oh, by golly, that embarrassed her father. And anyway, well, then he came on to Paradise and come in to the back door of that old hotel that my mother was running. And he knocked on the back door, and mother went to the back door to see who it was. And with real trembling hands, he raised up and took his hat off and says, my good lady, says, could you give an old man something to eat that is tired and hungry? And she says, why, yes, come on in and sit down right here at the kitchen table, and in just a few minutes, well, I'll get you something to eat. And then he walked in and sat down, and she started to get him something to eat, and he said, not in a minute, he says, Mama, I don't believe that I need anything before supper. And that really did get them. They didn't know him, of course. I remember it. I remember him, but of course I didn't know him because I was only 7 years old. Then he went on to El Paso and, to see a gal that he'd been going with that had lived in Rodeo and then moved on to El Paso, so he went down there. And one of these girls' brothers was running a little cigar stand and cigarette stand and candy and things right there on one of the big main streets of El Paso. So he walked in there and he hit up on the counter, and that old boy is sitting down and says, get up from here and give somebody a little service. That old boy got up and said, yes, sir, what do you want? So he bought, I think, he bought this girlfriend of his some candy and maybe a package of cigarettes or something, and turned around and walked out. Well, then with that full beard that night, then he shaved. He went out and had a picture taken. And all right then, that night he shaved. And he just had on just regular some work clothes when that happened. And that night after he shaved, well, the next day, then he went and with a suit on and had a picture taken. And he had those two pictures. One was taken one day and one was taken the next. And this after he'd shaved and all that, he went back down there to this little shop, and this old boy was sure glad to see him and was talking, and he says, say, Ernest, he says, yesterday, says, there was a doggone Mexico smuggler come in here. And see, it says he was a big, rugged son of a gun. And said, boy, he hit on that counter and hollered at me, and I jumped, and he bought some candy and a package of cigarettes, and then turned around and walked out. And he said the law was a-following him. And he says, I heard that they finally arrested him after he left. He said, boy, I sure wouldn't want to have tried to arrest a guy like that. And Ernest said, say, how big a guy was that fellow? Says, oh, he was a great big, rugged son of a gun. Well, Ernest said, well, was he about my size? Oh, no, Ernest, he wasn't anyways near your size. Says, he is a whole lot bigger than you are. And Ernest says, oh, listen, says, that wasn't no Mexico rustler. Says, that was me. That old boy said, why, you're crazy as a loon. I know good and well that wasn't you. Ernest says, yes, it was. He said, I'd been off on a hunting trip and hadn't shaved or anything in about 3 months. And says, that was me. That old boy said, well, I'd have to see the proof of it. So in a day or two, Ernest had both of those pictures and walked in there and showed that picture where he had his full beard. That old boy and says, was that the guy that come in here? And that old boy looked at it and said, yes, it is. Ernest says, all right. Says, Arnold, that was me. And so he was really full of pranks, and he is one of the greatest storytellers that I've ever heard. And when he told a story, it was true. And so that's one way that we've got a good reputation of being honest, truthful men, because we never did go around spreading big stories. And when anybody asked us anything, it was true, or if we told somebody anything, it was true. And that's the way that, by golly, that I think that it ought to be. Now, Bill Lee was the second boy, and I think he is only 2 years younger than Ernest. But anyway, well, now Bill was by quite a lot the smallest one of the bunch. He must not have been probably over about 5'8", 5'8 and a half, maybe. He might have been taller. I don't remember, and I don't remember hearing anybody say that they had ever measured his height. But anyway, he was fairly slender built, and a lot of the time I don't imagine his top weight was over 150, 155 when he was in real good flesh. Most of the time, I think he weighed around 145. But anyway, well, he was in World War II and went over to Vladivostok, over into Siberia there, and he spent his time there. And there wasn't much to do because it's so cold, especially there in the wintertime, that he run a poker game and won a lot of money. And he also run a game, and he'd take a little bite out of each pot, and by golly, he'd send it all home. And when he came home, he had enough money saved that he bought a ranch and made a big down payment on him for what he'd brought out of the Army. And after he came home then, you could never get him to take any cards in his hand. When people would want to play penny ante, he'd say, nothing doing. I laid them cards down and I'm not going to pick them up. He'd say, now, when I played poker, I played for money. And I couldn't be interested in play for a penny ante. And besides, my poker playing days are over, and he stood up to his word. He never did play any kind of poker anymore. And but he was kind of wild while he was growing up. When he went into the Army, well, in them days, well, the automobiles wasn't very many, and the prohibition is on. So I don't know. I was small, and I don't know where he was getting the liquor, although he was running liquor. And this is how honest all the laws was. All on his run, he had the laws all bought off. And so he is on a run, and one of these laws that he bought off picked him up. And so, all right, he produced a letter from this guy saying everything would be open, and this old boy says, well, go on. Turned him loose, and he went on, and then this law wired ahead and had him picked up. And anyway, well, they had him in the jail at Safford, Arizona. And so they just made a new jail down there and said it was man-proof. Well, there's an old boy one of them in the cell with him, and I think he is put in there for the same thing. And so, by golly, some way they got some hacksaws into their cell, smuggle in there. Somebody come see them or something. And anyway, Bill said they'd saw, and so neither one of them couldn't sing, but one would sing and the other would saw to keep down the noise. And they saw the place big enough that they could get out. So they notified Ernest just exactly when they'd get out and where to pick them up, right there close to the courthouse, about midnight one night. And so everything went all right, and Ernest picked them up. And Bill come home to Paradise, up there to where we lived. And that is about, I don't remember how many miles, but quite a few miles from Safford. And they sent the law in there after him a time or two. And one time he was in his old pot-bellied stove with his feet reared up telling the story, and they knocked on the back door and front door, and he went out the back and hid. And it was the law looking for him, but they wasn't trying to catch him very bad, so they drafted him into the Army. And so here's the way they sent the mail. They said, Rodeo, Paradise, or Safford Jail. And he got that call, and he just went on and served his time and come back, and they never did try to do anything to him anymore. Well, the next child was Leela, and she married a fellow by the name of Bill Click. And then they had one daughter, Nadine, actually, and that's the niece that I call home and stay with when I'm here in Tucson now. And she's a mighty fine woman, and been working up here at the bank for many years. And she's well liked by everybody that knows her. And Leela was well liked, but she isn't doing well now, and she can't hardly get around. So we have her in a kind of a private home over here where they have 5 or 6 other ladies, and she's doing pretty good. And sometimes I get to visit her a couple of times a week while I'm here. The usual days are on Thursdays and Sundays. And so I go visit her every time I get a chance. But I don't think she'll ever be able to stay and take care of herself anymore. And that is a pretty sad situation. Now, the next boy after Leela was Vincent. Now, he was a nice-looking fellow, and he was the second to the shortest, I guess, of any of the Lee boys. He was about 5'9", I guess, and but he was pretty stocky built, and he would weigh about 165. Now, he might have went 170 at times, but he was awful stout and awful strong built. And when we first came to, when we landed in Rodeo, New Mexico, my father had took up a homestead across the line and in Arizona, and we moved out there. Now, that's when I was just a year and a half old. Well, we hadn't been there very long till Barney and Vincent, they got them a bunch of burros. And I think it is 6 or 7 miles into Rodeo, and there were some boys in there that lived at Rodeo by the name of Cornforth. Cornforth was the boys' names, and it was George, he is the oldest, then Harold, then Ben. Well, they were, George and Harold was just a little, Harold was about Vincent's age, but Barney was big for his age, and George was 2 or 3 years older, and Ben was then younger than Barney. So they both had burros. Well, the Cornforth boys got one of their burros, they claimed. And so they met in Rodeo one time and had the doggonedest knockdown and drag out you ever saw. Barney and Vincent fighting George, Harold, and Ben Cornforth. And oh man, they had it. One of them got one of Barney's fingers in his mouth and chewed on it, and And so then Vincent got a chance, and he nearly chewed off one of their fingers. I don't remember which one. And anyway, it was really a battle, and a guy there turned loose a burro and run it off while the fight was going on, and they had a terrible time over that. And you know, they really hated one another the rest of their lives, and they grew up together over that incident. Well, anyway, then when World War I came along, Vincent was just of age, and so he joined the Navy. And he took up boxing, and by golly, he got pretty good. He got to where he could really box, but we boxed at home all the time, or those older boys did. And then I did quite a little, Clell and I and Arthur as we came on up. But we boxed all the time, and Vincent had boxed, so he took up boxing. And he learned to where he had hit with a straight punch, and he could really hurt a man, not over hitting him over 6 inches away. And he fought some of the best men in the Navy while he was in the Navy. Well, then Harold Cornforth, he went to the Army, and he took up boxing too, and he won quite a reputation in the Army. So after they came back then, we had a big rodeo and picnic and all one 4th of July over just down from Hilltop, which was a big mine, and a lot of the boys worked there. It was just a big promoting deal. They found lots of ore, but they never did make any money out of it, and they had to haul it out by trucks and all that. Anyway, there was lots of people at that picnic, and then they, after the picnic, at noon, about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, 2 o'clock, I think, they started the rodeo, and they roped and rode, and just some local cattle that they'd gathered up there from some ranchers, and had quite a time. Well, just as it was getting pretty late in the evening, they had this one of the main attractions was a prize fight between Harold Cornforth and Vincent Lee. And they just built right out on the ground, they just built a ring in a clear place there, and people was up on cars and watching all around, and then there was people just jammed up against that ring. Why, it was a real big crowd. And boy, they had a bunch of just common old kids boxing there, and they had a few preliminaries, and then they had the big main event, Vincent Lee and Harold Cornforth. And so they got them into the ring, and all right, the referee got them out brought them out to the middle of the ring, and give them their instructions and all that, and they stood there facing one another. Well, Vincent was quite a little bigger man then. He grew up to be a bigger man than Harold Cornforth. Harold Cornforth only weighed about 150, 155, and Vincent was about 10 pounds bigger then. He weighed about 165. And so they got him out and give him the orders and told them then, said, well, now you turn around and go back to your corner, and when you turn and come back out, we'll come back out of fighting. So everything was understood. So when the Benson turned to go back to his corner to come out of fighting, and when he did, before the gong ever sounded for the fight or anything else, old Cornforth just hit him. And boy, he hurt him too, because Benson wasn't even looking at him. He'd turned his side to him to go to his corner. And the fight started right then, before the gong ever sounded or anything. And at the end of the rounds, well, the referee would have a dickens of a time of getting them separated, because they both got mad and they were really fighting. And Ernest Benson was going with a girl from Douglas at Glen Houck, and she was a real nice-looking girl and a pretty girl. And Benson was going with her, and she was standing up to right against the ring, and she was a screaming at the top of her voice saying, "Kill him, Vincent, kill him." And everybody sure got a big kick out of that. Well, they only fought 3 rounds, and Vincent whipped him, but he never did knock him out because that cornforth was really tough. But anyway, well, later on then, at a big celebration at Paradise, and one of the big dance halls had a big ring and a bunch of preliminary fights, and Vincent and him fought again. And I've forgotten how many rounds, but they fought quite a few rounds on that fight. And Vincent whipped him again, and then Vincent he quit training or anything, and he never did fight anymore. To be a Jaguar track, and it looks fresh to me. He said, I haven't. Well, Vincent then, he was one of the 4 of us that hunted a lot, and he was a good hunter, and he hunted for years for the government. And then he helped take out parties too, and he was killed then by a mule in 1947 up on the Sierra Ancha Mountains there, over on Reynolds Creek, I think it was, right close to that forest camp there. He owned a little place there. Now now Barney, he was the next in line, and he was really the tallest one of the bunch. He was just a little bit taller than I was, only he was always a lot broader and bigger and lots bigger boned and had big hands and feet and all, and he was just a lot bigger. But he was tall and never carried too much weight most of the time. But even then, he'd weigh around 185 to 190 pounds a lot of the time. And he grew up a boxing, would be a boxing Vincent and all that a lot. So, see, Barney got married when he was 19. And so Vincent happened to be at home there, and Barney came down one Sunday afternoon. And Vincent told Ernest, says, "Say, Ernest," says, "talk Barney into putting on the gloves," and says, "I'll fix him so when he goes back up, well, by golly, that little old girl won't hardly know him." And he'd only been married, I think, about a month. So Ernest says, "Well, I'll see what I can do." So when Barney came down and visited a while, Ernest says, "Say, Barney, why don't you and Vincent put on the gloves and get out there behind the house and that clear place kind of under that old cherry tree and have a little workout?" Old Vince says, "Yeah, I'd like to work out a little bit." Well, Barney says, "All right." So they walked out there, and Ernest tied the gloves and all on them, and they stepped out there, and boy, they went together. Well, Vincent was lots faster than